The night air in Blackthorn Valley was cold and sharp, but no one in the crowd seemed to notice. Thousands of wolves, dressed in their finest cloaks, stood shoulder to shoulder around the great stone circle where the mating ceremony was held every year. Torches lined the edges of the field, their flames flickering against the dark sky, and the moon hung high and full above them, watching like a silent judge. Lyra Ashworth stood near the back of the crowd, wrapped in a plain gray shawl that did little to keep out the chill. She was used to standing at the back. She was used to being overlooked. For 22 years, she had lived with a secret shame that everyone in the valley knew about anyway. Her wolf had never appeared. Not once. Not during her first shift ceremony at 13, not during any full moon since. The pack called her the Wolfless Girl, and the name followed her everywhere, whispered behind hands, spoken openly by cruel children, printed quietly into the way people looked at her and then looked away. Her family had once held a respected place in the pack. Her mother had been kind and well-liked, though quiet about her own family history. But after her mother passed and Lyra's wolf failed to appear year after year, the Ashworth name became a mark of pity. Her father worked twice as hard to keep their small home in order, and Lyra spent her days helping in the kitchens of the Great Hall, far from where nobility gathered, far from where anyone expected her to matter. Tonight, however, she could not stay in the back. Her name had been called. Every wolf in the kingdom was destined to meet their fated mate at some point after their 18th birthday, though for many it never happened at all. It was rare, almost mythical, when a mate bond activated in front of the entire kingdom during the ceremony. Rarer still, when that mate turned out to be Alpha King Cade Direwolf himself. Lyra had heard her name shouted by the ceremony elder, had felt hundreds of eyes turned toward her, and had walked forward on legs that did not feel like her own. The crowd parted, whispers spread like fire through dry grass. She kept her eyes down, afraid that if she looked up, she would lose whatever courage she had left. When she finally reached the center of the stone circle, she lifted her gaze and saw him. Cade Direwolf stood taller than any man she had ever seen, his shoulders broad beneath a black cloak trimmed with silver thread, his eyes the color of a stormy sky. He was the kind of leader other alphas feared and respected in equal measure, a king who had unified fractured territories through strength most wolves could not imagine standing against. He was said to be fair in battle and merciless to enemies, but tonight, standing before her, his expression was unreadable. For one breathless moment, Lyra let herself hope. Perhaps this was the moment everything would change. Perhaps being chosen by fate meant she was not broken after all. Cade inhaled slowly, and she watched the exact instant recognition crossed his face. His nostrils flared, his eyes widened just slightly. The bond had confirmed itself, the invisible thread that connected fated pairs snapping into place between them. A murmur rushed through the crowd, thousands of voices rising and falling like a wave. But then his expression hardened. "This cannot be right," he said, loud enough for the crowd to hear. His voice was cold, edged with disbelief, and something close to disgust. "She has no wolf. She is nothing." The words struck her like a physical blow. Lyra felt her breath catch in her throat, felt the warmth drain from her face. Around her, the whispers grew louder, sharper, hungrier. This was the kind of moment the pack lived for, the kind of story that would be repeated for years. "I reject this bond," Cade said, his voice ringing clearly across the stone circle. "I will not tie my throne, my pack, or my future to a wolfless girl. She is unworthy to stand beside a king." The silence that followed felt heavier than anything Lyra had ever known. She stood frozen, humiliation burning through her chest, tears gathering at the edges of her eyes, though she refused to let them fall. Rejection before the pack was the deepest shame a wolf could endure, a public declaration that one was not good enough, not wanted, not worthy of love or loyalty, and it had just happened to her, in front of thousands, spoken by the most powerful man in the kingdom. She could hear her father somewhere in the crowd, could feel his pain radiating toward her, even though she could not see his face. She could hear laughter, quiet and cruel, from those who had always looked down on her family. She could feel every eye in the stone circle weighing her, judging her, confirming what they had always believed. Something inside her chest cracked. It did not feel like sadness at first. It felt like heat, spreading from her heart outward, burning through her veins like liquid fire. Her hands trembled at her sides, her vision blurred, not with tears, but with something else, something powerful and strange that she had never felt before. The humiliation, the years of whispered insults, the loneliness of being the girl with no wolf, all of it rose up inside her like a wave that could no longer be held back. The crowd began to notice. The murmurs shifted, confusion replacing mockery. Someone gasped, someone else stepped back. Lyra did not understand what was happening to her body. Her skin felt too tight, her bones felt like they were shifting beneath the surface, and a sound built in her throat that was not quite a sob and not quite a growl. She closed her eyes, overwhelmed, and for the first time in her life, she stopped fighting whatever was inside her. She let it come. Light burst from her skin, silver and bright, like moonlight given form. The crowd cried out and stumbled backward as Lyra's body began to change, not slowly and painfully as most shifts occurred, but in one powerful, radiant motion. Where a small, tired young woman had stood a moment before, a massive wolf now rose, her fur glowing faintly silver, her eyes burning with the same fire that had consumed her heart only seconds earlier. She was larger than any wolf in the kingdom, larger even than Cade's own wolf form, which many had believed to be the strongest ever seen in Blackthorn Valley. Her presence alone seemed to press down on the crowd, an ancient weight settling over the stone circle. Elders at the front of the crowd fell to their knees, some in shock, some in reverence. An old woman near the ceremony platform pressed a trembling hand to her mouth and whispered a name that had not been spoken aloud in centuries. Moonfire, she breathed. The Moonfire bloodline lives. The words spread through the crowd like sparks catching dry leaves. Lyra did not understand what they meant, not fully, not yet, but she could feel the truth of it humming beneath her new skin. Her mother's quiet stories, the ones she had never fully explained, the old journal hidden in a chest that Lyra had never been able to open, it all connected now in ways she could not yet put into words. The Moonfire Wolves, once the true rulers of this land, protectors of balance and light, long before the Direwolf dynasty rose to power, had not gone extinct after all. They had simply been waiting, hidden in a bloodline no one thought to fear. Cade stared at her, his earlier certainty crumbling into something far more complicated: shock, disbelief, and beneath it, though he would never have admitted it aloud, something that looked almost like fear. He tried to assert himself the only way he knew how, stepping forward and calling on the natural dominance that had made him king, the instinctive authority that every wolf in his presence had always yielded to without question. But when his power reached toward Lyra, it did not find submission. It found resistance, ancient and unshakable, rising to meet him like a wall of silver flame. The crowd watched in stunned silence as Cade, Alpha King of Blackthorn Valley, undefeated in battle and unquestioned in authority, staggered under the weight of her presence. His knees buckled, slowly, and without any command from her at all, he sank down before her, his head bowed, his massive frame trembling in a way none of his people had ever witnessed. For a long moment, no one moved, no one breathed. Lyra's wolf form began to recede, the silver light fading gently back into her skin until she stood once more as herself, though changed in ways that went far deeper than appearance. She looked down at Cade, kneeling before her in the very place where he had rejected her only minutes earlier, and she felt no triumph, no cruelty, only a quiet, steady strength she had never known she possessed. Cade lifted his head slowly, meeting her eyes. Whatever pride had driven his earlier words seemed to have drained completely from his face. "I did not know," he said, his voice quieter now, stripped of its earlier certainty. "Lyra, I did not know who you were." "You didn't need to know my bloodline to treat me with respect," she said, and her voice, though soft, carried clearly across the silent stone circle. "You only needed to see me as a person." The crowd remained frozen, watching the exchange, as though witnessing something they would tell their grandchildren about for generations to come. Cade rose slowly to his feet, though he did not stand at his full height, some instinct keeping him lower than his usual proud posture. "The bond is real," he said. "Whatever I said before does not undo that. I was wrong to reject you. I ask for the chance to make things right." Lyra studied him for a long moment. Around them, The entire kingdom waited, breathless, wondering if she would accept him, if the story would end the way so many old tales ended, with forgiveness and a crown shared between two once divided souls. But Lyra had spent her whole life being underestimated, dismissed, and shamed by people who never bothered to look closer. She would not build her future on a foundation of someone else's regret. "I don't owe you my forgiveness tonight," she said. "You had your chance to know me, and you chose humiliation instead. I will not pretend that a moment of fear now erases what you did in front of everyone I know." She turned to face the crowd, the same crowd that had watched her be shamed only minutes before. Many of them now looked at her with something entirely new: wonder, respect, even a flicker of shame of their own for the years of quiet cruelty they had allowed. "I am not wolfless," she said, her voice steady and clear. "I never was. I simply carried something the world had forgotten how to recognize. And I will not let anyone, king or otherwise, decide my worth for me, ever again." With that, she turned and walked away from the stone circle, her steps sure and unhurried, leaving Cade standing alone beneath the watching moon. In the days that followed, word of what happened at the mating ceremony spread far beyond Blackthorn Valley. The story of the wolfless girl who had revealed herself as the last of the Moonfire line, who had made the mighty Alpha King kneel without lifting a single claw against him, traveled from pack to pack, growing with each retelling. Lyra did not seek out power or vengeance. Instead, she returned to her family's modest home, opened the old chest her mother had left behind, and finally read the journal inside, learning the truth of a bloodline that had chosen humility over pride for generations, protecting its light quietly, rather than ruling with force. She began, slowly, to understand her mother's silence, and to honor it by choosing her own path forward, one built on strength earned rather than power seized. Cade sent messages in the weeks that followed, requests for an audience, apologies written in careful and formal language, offers to share his throne and correct the wrong he had done before the entire kingdom. Lyra did not answer right away. She was in no hurry. For the first time in her life, she was not waiting for anyone's approval or acceptance. She was simply living, learning who she truly was, one quiet day at a time. Whether she would ever choose to stand beside Cade, whether the bond between them might one day be rebuilt on something stronger than fate alone, remained a story still being written. But one truth was clear to everyone who had witnessed that night beneath the full moon. The girl once dismissed as nothing had become someone no one in the kingdom would ever underestimate again. And somewhere in Blackthorn Valley, an old king was learning, perhaps for the first time in his long and unchallenged life, what it truly meant to be humbled.